Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have a great time today. I love this. We're going to get back to my roots and be talking about marketing and all of the important things that goes with it, and a lot of the misperceptions that people have about marketing. So please join me in welcoming Ken Cook to our program today. Welcome, Ken.
Hey, thank you so much for having me today.
Great. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So having a passion for local small businesses, Ken Cook began the development of prepared marketing. With dedication and experience, Ken has successfully grown his company from a one-man operation to a small agency employing a variety of talented workers that continually contribute to its success. In 2018, the Prepared Group was created, shifting the focus from tactical agency services to a comprehensive marketing strategy consulting process. And what he doesn't say in his bio that I found somewhere else is that he was born with that cowboy hat on. So again, Ken, welcome so much for to be on the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have a chat with you all today.
Great. Well, what I always like to start with is to have my guests tell us how they got to where they are today and how you discovered that this is your passion in life. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I tell people I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I had a client offer me a year's salary to start my own company.
Oh. And you said, okie dokie.
And I said, well, what does that mean?
Yeah. Does that mean I'm no longer employed?
Well, what had happened is I worked for a 650-man agency.
Okay.
And they were dissolving my department. And long story short, I was going to go work for another agency. They had offered me a very competitive offer. I'm doing my final interview with the owner. And on his desk is this very cute picture of he and his wife and his son. And on his computer screensaver, for those in your audience old enough to remember those things, like I am, was he and his mistress on a wine tour.
Oh, I take it neither of those women visited the office.
Who knows? And so I remember thinking to myself, if that's what he's willing to do to his family, what is he willing to do to his employees?
Right.
And so I called up this guy, Jim, and I said, Jim, I was going to go work here. I had worked with him for several years. We'd made his company a ton of money. I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess I'm going to have to find another agency. I don't know. I thought this was pretty on lock. They were looking to start the department that I was just leaving, et cetera. And he goes, oh, I got you covered. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to start your own company. I'll be your first client. I'll give you a year's salary. Where should I send the check? And I said, what do you mean send the check?
Right.
He goes, well, for your first month. Just give me your address. And so I gave him my address. And a couple days later came a check and a $1 bill.
And the $1 bill was for?
And I'll tell you. So Jim he was the first wine tour company on Long Island. He ran a company called Long Island Wine Tours. And he also on the side, I guess that was on the side, and his full-time job was he was a postmaster for a small post office on Long Island. And in this letter that he had sent was him talking about the adventure of starting a business. And he said, I guess I'm the one who's giving you your first dollar. It's really hard to frame a check, especially one of this size. I've enclosed a crisp new dollar bill. Make sure you frame it and put it on the wall. And that's just the kind of guy he was. And so we did, framed it. It hung in my office for years and years and years. And that's really how we got started. It was a true, honest to goodness accident.
I love it. And more importantly, he was a great mentor. And I think that's one of the things that so many people are missing nowadays is they think we can do this. we can, we don't need anybody helping us. And in truth, they do. They need mentors to help out.
I ran my agency for about 4 years, 3 years, and we never accomplished a ton. And then I watched an interview with Condoleezza Rice, and Condoleezza Rice was talking about how every time she saw George Bush, he asked her what new book she was reading. And it was an expectation.
It would be a new book.
That it would be a new book every time. Well, it turns out Bush read a massive amount while he was in office. He averaged more than 8 books a month.
Wow.
Okay. And most of his staff were that level or higher. He and Karl Rove at one point had a competition, and Rove was averaging over a 2-year period, 11 books a month. Right. So we're not talking like, hey, I did it for a couple of months. We're talking for years.
Right. It was a true habit.
It was the habit. And so I thought about this. I looked at this. I did a bunch of research around it. And I said to myself, I probably should really read some books. I didn't really know why. I just, seeing some examples, seeing other CEOs, hearing stories. I said, this is a practice I should start. I'm going to figure it out. The second year into this process, second full year, I finished 133 books that year.
Holy cow.
And we grew by more than 300% that year. The previous year, we had more than doubled. And the more I read, the more we grew. And the more we grew, the more I needed to read. And it created this cycle. I remember one day I was talking to my accountant, and he says, well, just look at your balance sheet. And I realized, because I went to school for philosophy. I was a philosophy major. Okay. And I went to school to learn debate, to learn discussion, because I was going to be a pastor. And that's what I did right out of college for a number of years. And kind of long story short with that is, I said, well, I guess I got to learn about accounting. And so each month I would take a different topic, and that's what I would study in my reading. And I would try to read at least 6 books on that one topic, and then 4 other books that were of interest, relevant, new, out by an author I enjoyed, etc. All business books, no fiction, but some biographies, that kind of a thing as well. And so one day I come back to the accountant and I say, I think the problem with our balance sheet is we're running gap-based accounting. And while that's really effective if we are a large organization, given the size, I think a non-GAAP model would be far more effective. I'd really like you to be able to give me these, and these numbers. You think we can make that work? And he kind of looked at me and he goes, well, no one's ever asked me that before. And I said, how many of your clients actually know what the heck a balance sheet is for?
Right. And ever even look at them.
Right. And he laughed and he said, well, I don't think very many of them know what it's for. And I think even fewer of them read it. And I said, well, you told me to go read it and I didn't know how. So I figured out how, but I don't think our balance sheet is sufficient any longer. And so it's those kinds of things that when you're talking about getting a mentor, we live in an age where the best business minds are available to you.
Right.
In many cases for free, if you just go and grab it.
Right.
Right.
And I love the continual learning aspect.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of people who they listen to podcasts or they do other things to learn. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I used to listen to 5 or 6 podcasts a day religiously. And what I have found is a good, well-edited audiobook, well-produced, has, if you take an hour, 50 minutes of it is really tight, edited, quality information, and 10 minutes of it is fluff. You look at the average hour-long podcast, 50 minutes of it is fluff.
Right.
And 10 minutes of it is really solid quality information. And
because let's be honest, we chat a lot.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right. We're chatting right now. And you know what? In a book format, this is 1 paragraph, maybe 2.
Right.
And there's going to be more story in this and some other things, but a good edited version allows you to get more information more efficiently. And so for me, I just said, you know what? I need to be the best version of me. How can I drive more of this kind of learning so that I can be a better leader
Mm-hmm.
in this organization. And we ended up having a staff of 10 people. It's not like stayed super small. We never grew huge, but I mean,
10's a pretty good size for an agency. Mm-hmm.
You know, for a guy who never went to business school,
Mm-hmm.
never took a marketing class in college,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's kind of where we grew to. And I look at some of that and I say, almost all of it is because I committed to learning. In fact, there was a point, and some of our current staff will tell you this because they remember it from 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We had a policy that said you had 2 weeks from when you were first hired
Mm-hmm.
to read 4 books, and there was a specific 4 books.
Uh-huh.
And if you didn't read them, we would fire you. I
Did
only
they have to do like a book report?
Nope. They had to tell me that they read them.
Okay.
Because so one of those books was Spin Selling, here right over my shoulder,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? This gives them the language to communicate within the office.
Right.
Because if I say, well, tell me about the implication of XYZ,
Mm-hmm.
and you have no idea all that's wrapped up into that term, can you really communicate in our culture?
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't.
Right.
Right. And so I did this as a way of quickly indoctrinating people into the culture, but also if I couldn't trust them to read 4 books in 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Then
not
you couldn't trust them.
I couldn't trust them
Mm-hmm.
because they couldn't commit to anything. Because every one of those people said, yes, I'll read them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it also, the one guy that we fired for not doing it, I remember it distinctly. I called him into the office. I said, look, did you read the 4 books? He said, I read 2 of them.
Huh?
And then he proceeded to give me 3 or 4 excuses. And I just said, you know what? I hear that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let you go.
Mm-hmm. He made that commitment and he didn't
made
keep
the
it.
commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like as an owner,
Mm-hmm.
this was how I had to protect my culture.
Mm-hmm.
Is we would, this is true, on Wednesdays, we would sit down. This was when having a 3D camera was cool. You probably can still find some of these old recordings on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
We would sit down, we would put a 3D camera in the middle of our little office. We would all gather around and we would talk about a subject.
Ah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my way of making sure that our staff was continually getting best practices from one another, thinking through issues, etc. Right. Talking about things. If I said, hey, for a week from now, I need you to read this book, I need to know that I've got the kind of person who can do that.
Right.
Right. And if you can't read 4 books when you're first here in the honeymoon phase, when you're trying to impress us, what's going to happen 6 months from now when you're not?
Well, and if he got away with not reading them, then other people are going to go, well, wait a minute, why am I doing it?
Yep, exactly. It's a culture thing. And that was part of the culture that we set up. In fact, we put together this old cultural document. I probably should dig it out at some point. We wrote down a bunch of cultural values, and one of them was intelligence. And I remember it because we had a Monty Python joke about calculating the speed of African swallows in there. And what was really funny is no one ever got the joke. Like I had so many people like that were applying, that were interviewing, ask, well, what is that? Like, I don't understand what these kinds of birds are. No one ever got the Monty Python reference in there.
Right.
And it was something that we used to say, look, if you don't get our sense of humor, maybe you're not going to be a good fit here.
Right.
You know? Just funny
Corporate
things like
culture. I mean, so many folks, and I think it's taken a hit because of COVID. When we're not in the office. I mean, the thing about corporate culture is you have to be in the same place with people in order to really have that culture and experience it. You can be remote, but no, I mean, it's and get your work done, but that culture is the social aspect. And I mean, people don't understand sometimes culture is, hey, we go out for lunch every Thursday. We do a Habitat for Humanity house. I worked for a big financial company where we had many of our employees who were actuaries, so the real numbers people, who were tutors at a local elementary school. I mean, and that was just part of the culture. And things like that have definitely taken a hit with the whole work from home thing.
Oh, absolutely. I just finished reading a book earlier this week called You Are What You Do. And the whole argument is culture is what you do. And you can, for better or worse, look at your culture not aspirationally, what would we like to be, but factually, what do we actually do?
Right.
Very, very interesting kind of a thing.
Right. And I love the concept, and I read quite a bit because I have to for this program. I always tell people, if I'm going to talk about your book, I'm going to read it. Am I reading it word for word for word? Yeah, I'm probably skimming it a little bit, but I mean, you read 100 books a year. I mean, that's a couple books a week. I mean, that really is quite a bit. But, and for everybody who just went at that, put your phone down and pick up a book. I'm serious about that. It's an hour. I mean, you probably aren't sitting there reading for 5-6 hours a night, unless you find a book that you really can't put down. But yeah, an hour is probably going to do it. And that's the time that we're playing Wordle, that we're, reading ESPN, that we're, all of those things. And yeah, put your phone down, folks. And even if it's not business books, biographies, all of those things. And, shoot, fluff has its place too.
Yeah. I find if I spend 2 hours a day, 6 days a week, I can very easily get through 2 to 4 books a week.
Right.
And what's interesting is if you listen to like Warren Buffett or Mark Cuban, they'll actually say they have 3 hours of their working day is uninterruptible reading time. And I wonder to what extent, if you were to just take your 8 hours a day and say, look, 2 hours of my 8 are reading, are making me better, more efficient, giving me better ideas, etc. And therefore I need to be really efficient with the 6 that I have. I wonder if you could use the same amount of working hours, but have more impact.
I think you could.
I think
and that's where remote working, I think, has kind of been a benefit because of the social aspects. I mean, how much time when we're in the office do we spend chit-chatting, visiting at the coffee machine, all of those things? And, we're not doing that. Now, granted, I've home office for many years, but yeah, that aspect, I think I think, and I've heard people say this, where they say, my normal 8-ish hour, per day is 6. I've had one guy say 4. He said, I can get done in 4 hours what I used to do in the office because of all of the distractions and the interruptions. So, there he just gained 4 hours that he could be reading.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the point here is how can you, as a manager, as an owner, as someone in a leadership role, how can you create a culture that empowers your people to read? Right. That empowers education, that empowers the betterment of your team. And by something as simple as, hey, start with half an hour a day is dedicated to reading 5 days a week. I'm going to pay you for 2.5 hours to read. Right. And every other week, we're going to have a discussion about what we've been reading. Right. Something as simple as that is going to pay off in spades because you're bettering your team every single day. You're getting a better worker the next day than you had today. Every single time. And those workers know that you care about them. I mean, there's that little perk in there too. People, they announced, I think it was last week, that the company that owns Dollywood and several other, parks, theme parks, whatever they are, is now saying, 100% we will pay your education, even if you're a part-time employee. And I mean, the sad thing is that made the news because it's so unique. And the companies that do that, I hear a lot of people say, well, but they're going to lose those people. They might, but it's also, it comes back to that culture thing. Hey, we care about you. Even if it means that you're going to better yourself to the point where you go somewhere else, we still made you better while you were here. Yep. Well, and what does that do to the way people, your employees, talk about you, help recruit other employees?
Right.
the loyalty that it engenders. I mean, there's a lot there. I think we can.
Right. And for those that are listening or watching who are at the one person shops, it's just as easy for us to be doing it too. Again, put our phones down, read in the morning. I do a half an hour every morning where, I'm listening to Audible books. But yeah, I mean, it's just, and I do it on weekends too, because I decided, you know what, it's not a negative thing. So I shouldn't be wanting to take a day off from it. And then I read a lot at night, but yeah, I mean, it's something that, people, you've got your phone, you've got your book, you've got your whatever with you. We're sitting for an appointment, waiting for 15 minutes. Okay. Are you going to play Wordle? Are you going to read? It's really not that complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that.
Well, holy cow, we got off on quite the tangent here. I love this. It's some of we were back to the fact that we just kind of we're chatting and not talking about business. But I think it's important for people to understand that's part of how you have a successful business. Is we continually have to better ourselves. And I love that as you said, you don't have a marketing degree. You're not an MBA, but you have an incredibly successful marketing firm. And I know part of that is because you have an analytical mind that looks at this and says, we need to know our numbers. It's not just, hey, we're going to have this pretty Super Bowl commercial. We need to know our numbers. So, okay, let's get into this. Why do we need to know our numbers?
Why do you need to know how much is in your bank account?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why do you not just go write checks without checking?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Numbers are business.
Mm-hmm.
The simple the simple reality is, if you were to look historically at business, the purpose of business has always been to increase the value of the stock for the shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're a solopreneur, guess what? You're the sole shareholder, right? If you're in a partnership, maybe you're a 50-50, maybe you're a 60-30, whatever you are, right? You are the shareholders. And the job of the business is to return value to those shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
If you are not watching your money, if you are not watching your numbers, if you are not running the numbers are running you.
Right.
And the simple reality is, no good in business comes from ignorance at any point. And I kind of tell people, if you don't know your numbers, you may have a well-paid hobby, but you don't have a business.
Right.
Right. The simple reality is, if you don't know your numbers, no one is ever willing to purchase that business.
Right.
No one is willing to invest in that business. Imagine going to the bank and saying, hey, I'd like a loan. Well, tell me about your business. Oh, well, we do these really cool things. Right. But what are the numbers? Oh, I don't know about that stuff.
Right. Yeah. We had money at the end of the year.
Right. Well, I mean, the reality is, most small businesses run based upon their checking account.
Right. Can we do this? Yes or no?
Right. They do not future plan. They therefore suffer tremendous lack of growth because they cannot forecast effectively. Right. And so we spent more money this week on marketing than I have ever spent before in any of my businesses.
Wow.
Okay. We spent a lot of money in one transaction this week to buy premier sponsorship at a very targeted event. Okay. Why? Well, I know my numbers. I know that it's going to cost me a certain amount to go to the event, to speak at the event, to have flyers, handouts, swag, et cetera, for the event. Right. And I also know exactly how many sales I need to break even.
Right.
Right. The payback rate, how fast am I breaking even based on those sales? Right. And so I've got a bound that says, look, if I get this many, I'm successful. right? If I get this many, I'm break even. And if I get this many, I'm not successful. Well, if I know those things and I can then say, well, how successful was this? I can then say next year or in 6 months when the event happens again, should I sponsor it again? Should I look for other events to sponsor?
Right.
Because I know my numbers. And so many people find this odd from a marketing perspective to be talking about this. The reality is marketing, if we were to walk into any Fortune level organization, is not about creating pretty pictures.
Right.
It is not about how does my logo or brochure look. It is fundamentally about how much revenue are we generating for the money that we are spending.
Right.
So much so that in some organizations, they have demoted the CMO off of the board, off of the executive team, replaced them with a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer. The CMO is in charge of brand, and the revenue officer is in charge of the actual revenue that the marketing department produces. And that's been a long coming trend, right? But the reality is, as small business owners, we should have been working this way all along.
Right.
Right. But we've been sold a bill of goods that says, you just need to be on the first page of Google. You just need to be running Facebook ads.
Right.
You just need this SEO package. You just need this thing, this other thing. You just need these tactics and you'll be fine. Don't worry about the numbers. They'll work themselves out. I don't know how well this is going to perform. I don't know what my acquisition cost is. I don't know anything, but don't worry. It'll work itself out.
You'll be on the first page of Google. What does it matter?
It's utter nonsense. And it's, and unfortunately it is sold by people in my industry over and over and over and over and over. And it's wrong. And it's not the way to run a business because it's paramount to gambling.
Right. And yeah, that is, you are gambling that it will work.
Yep.
And of course, what happens is, and you know, I've been doing marketing and PR longer than you have, you know, and of course, one of the things people say, well, it's hard to measure. Yeah, there's ways you can do it. I mean, you know, long ago we figured out some ways that we could measure these things.
In 1900, Claude Hopkins wrote the book, Scientific Advertising.
Oh yeah.
And he argues in that book in 1900, 120 some odd years ago,
before you had a smartphone.
Right. This is how you calculate. Right. Guess what? It's only gotten easier from there.
Right. Yeah. Because of technology.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. I remember, you know, years ago, I worked for the American Cancer Society and I did their public and media relations. And, you know, and as happens, you have to justify your existence, right? And so they said, well, how do we know that this PR campaign made money? And we did it a pretty easy way. You know, I mean, it was still kind of a guess, but, you know, and this was 30-ish years ago. So, you know, technology was obviously not nearly as advanced as it is. We had a separate phone number and you called that to do whatever it was. Now, did you have people that called the regular number? Sure. Did you have people who called that number who wanted something else? Sure. But for the most part, we could say, okay, this, you know, commercial ran on channel 4 and we immediately got 20 phone calls to that number. Those 20 phone calls got us X. And, you know, and it really, like I said, it was not all that difficult. And now, shoot, with things like Google, you know, free numbers and all of those things, that's an easy thing. I mean, you know, it is not hard to get your numbers. The hard thing is for people to understand what the numbers mean.
Right. Well, and that's where it was 2010 when the book of the year was data-driven marketing. So 12 years we've had this workout. Okay. I still would say more than 90% of people don't know what acquisition cost is. They don't know how to calculate it, etc. And that's either because they choose to be ignorant, right? Or this doesn't matter to them. But the data, the information is there for you to get.
Right.
If you want it. Right. However, bad marketers have an interest in you not having this.
Right. Because they want you to do more marketing.
Well, it's not that. I mean, that's part of it, but it's more than that. It's if they don't know if the campaign is working or not, or if they know it's not.
Right. Well, back to justifying your existence, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. If you don't know your numbers, they can get away with running a bad campaign and saying it just takes a little longer. Mm-hmm. It just takes a little longer.
Right.
Right. And I mean, there's a lot of guys in this industry who they're living hand to mouth. Mm-hmm. And they're doing so because they have a bad business. They're not good at what they do, etc. Right. And that then leads to them taking advantage of business owners, unfortunately. And it doesn't look like that necessarily from the outside, but as someone who's been in this industry for a while, right, has seen kind of a number of sides. One of the things I would really point out is there are more people that I hear who say my marketing agency did XYZ, and I ask a basic question. Well, what was this number? What was that number? Well, we've never talked about that with them.
Right.
Right. There's no excuse for them to be ignorant. There's no excuse for them. Okay. 2, if that's really the case, you've got to ask yourself, what happened in my vendor selection process that I hired this kind of person?
Right.
You know, and I don't mean to be overly harsh here. I know I'm being a little bit harsh, but the reality is I'm being harsh because if you don't know this stuff, you're going to be taken advantage of. Right. And you're more than likely going to lose money.
Well, right? And we make other departments tell us the numbers.
Absolutely.
And that's where the breakdown comes in. And it comes back to what I was saying. People go, well, it's hard to measure marketing.
You know, there's a tool that we use called Wicked Reports. Okay. It's a company out of Boston. And what they are marketing attribution software. Okay. I can tell you to the penny that for every $264 I spent last month, I made $5,000.
Ooh, that's a pretty good turnaround.
Okay. To the penny. I know exactly that. Right. Well, that enables me to do some things, right? To invest in some ways that other people can't because they don't know the numbers.
Right.
This software is what, $400-600 a month?
Pays for itself pretty quick, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Well, because think about it. I mean, I've gone and done audits for people over the years, over the past 10, 12 years. I have seen so many people whose entire spend on marketing produced nothing. True story, by the way. I was consulting with a very large public company. Public company. I'm not going to say their name. They were spending about $50,000 a week on Google Ads.
Holy cow.
Okay. That was their budget. Over the previous year, it had accounted for $1,200 worth of revenue.
Total for the year.
For the year. That I could track.
But they were on the first page of Google.
Maybe. Who knows? Right? My point is, no one is immune from this. But if we don't know, and if we aren't examining, and if we aren't watching, right? They might as well have just taken $1 million.
Just thrown it away.
And
they did. They just threw it away.
And I think it was, pretty close to $2.5 million that they lit on fire. Right? For what reason?
Right.
Because of poor systems, poor process, poor structure within their marketing setup.
Right.
Right.
And a lot of it is the basics.
Yep.
Not knowing who the heck they're trying to even market to. Yep. I mean, we talk about, finding your niche, finding your avatar, all of those things. Anytime somebody tells me, if I say, so Ken, tell me who your perfect client is, and you look at me and you say, everyone, that should be the biggest red flag in the world, right? Because it's not. And so you have to know those things. I'm coming back to the Super Bowl commercials. That's the only reason I watched that football game, right? And I mean, those cost millions of dollars to produce and then for the ad buy. And you can't tell me that any of them make that money back. Now there's awareness, there's, all those things, which that's part of what we do as marketing is we build, but my favorite one is the Doritos one where it's the animals and they go do, 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 and they start singing. I mean, I just think that's cute because it's animals. Now it did cost probably less to produce because it's CGI. And so as opposed to like some of the commercials who had some of the really big name stars where they probably wrote them $1 million check just for the commercial. But and then they had the ad buy, which, there's the rate that they tell everybody, and then there's the rate that they actually pay. So you're never quite sure about that. But there's no way that all of that money people raced out, because you have to do it fairly quickly because our attention span is on to the next thing, and bought enough Doritos to pay for those spots. I mean, it's just not going to happen. And that's, I think that's one of the sad things is we get sucked into the glamour, the pretty, we want to, whether maybe it's a small business and they're thinking, hey, I want to win the award. Or, you mentioned sponsoring something. We get sucked into sponsoring an event that it doesn't make sense for us to sponsor, but it's a way cool event and we really should be there. It comes back to, we just don't know what we don't know sometimes. And we really don't know what that end is. We think, hey, let's put this money into it and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And I mean, it's just, it's a complicated question, because, they just don't understand it. So, one of the things that I know you talk about is how marketing isn't always marketing. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. Most people, when I say marketing, or when you say marketing, what they heard us say was advertising.
Right. The Super Bowl ad. Great example.
Right. And the problem is marketing is so much more than that, right? We talk about a frame. We have a kind of our own framework. And the idea within our framework is, look, we go from first, how do we attract people in, right? How do we capture that data? How do we nurture those people into a sale, right? How do we actually convert them? How do we onboard them effectively? I just want to pause here for a second. The first 4 people are like, oh yeah, that's marketing. Okay. I get it. Maybe a little sales, but okay, that's marketing. Every time I say onboarding, people give me weird looks.
Right. Why does that pertain to marketing?
There are a number of studies that have shown, most of them published in like Harvard Business Review, that effective onboarding drastically increases both client stickiness, but also likelihood to refer, also overall spend, as well as some other critical things.
Right.
And so you look at this and I say, have you ever had a business that you sign a contract with and the onboarding experience is so bad that you regret it? I think we've all kind of been there.
Right.
Right.
Or you don't even get an onboard experience.
Right. Well, that is their experience, right? And I look at that and I say, whether that's intentional or not, that's marketing. That's communication about your organization.
Right.
And then even more so, though, how do we create customer delight? What we like to call surprise, delight, and wow. Right? This idea of how do I build a meaningful, impactful relationship with my clientele? Well, if that's not intentional, if that's simply occasional, right, the likelihood is I'm not going to have great relationships, or I'm going to have very few great relationships, as opposed to a whole tribe of raving fans. Right. It was Peter Shankman who said, the average American is used to being treated like crap.
We think average is okay.
Yeah. And he goes on, he says, all you have to do to win is treat them one step above crap. Right. And I love this idea because you can do the smallest of things to create deeply loyal customers who are going to bring a path of people to your door who are going to be loyal to you for a very long time. not because you went out and wrote a huge check to them, right? But rather because you showed them that you cared.
Right.
Okay. From there, we want to look at, well, how do we systematically upsell? And by upsell, I don't just mean upsell, but all of the things that are in scope there.
Right.
Cross sell, right? Downsell.
It's not the, but wait, there's more type of thing.
Right. How do we give them the next thing? One problem is there's a lot of businesses that don't have a next thing.
Right. They're the one trick pony.
Well, we've got to create the next thing. Right. Or we have to find a partner who has the next thing that we can get paid for referring them. And then kind of the final piece that we look at is, well, referrals. And I always ask people this question, and I would encourage those of you who are listening to really think about this question. Do I have a systematic, documented plan by which I can garner referrals from all of my clients?
And virtually everybody are going to go, no.
Right. Now, what's funny is the number of businesses that tell me, well, we work off of referrals only. I say, great. Well, tell us
about it.
How do you extract referrals predictably? Or does your business do this? Are you on the business roller coaster where you're not sure where your next meal is coming from? And you just kind of have to sit there and hope that somebody buys, that somebody refers, right? Call me crazy, but that sounds insane.
That sounds like, right?
It sounds insane. Like if I came to you and I said, Deb, here's my business plan. I'm going to do some really good work for people and then really hope that they tell their friends.
Right.
And that one of those friends is going to then come to me and buy. You would say, that's the dumbest business plan I've ever heard. There's no way I'm going to give you time, money, effort to get behind that business plan. Yet, nearly every business I know functions in this area in that way.
Right.
And with all politeness, it's one of those areas that, if cleaned up, if done correctly, will result in massive growth.
Right.
In the SaaS world, they actually have a metric for this, and they call it K. Okay. And K is the rate of referral. Okay. And you can look up case studies about Dropbox and K. Dropbox got their rate of referral, or virality, sometimes referred to as, rate up to 2 at one point. So what this means is, for every client they signed, they had such a good system in place that for every client they signed, that client sent them 2 more.
Right.
Now think about what that means.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot until those 2 bring in 2, and those 2 bring in 2, and even I can do that math until my brain hurts.
This is how Dropbox went from unknown to ubiquitous in about 2.5 years.
Right.
Right. Because I don't know if you, I mean, I'm sure you remember, but I don't know if all of the people listening here remember. There was a time before Dropbox, and Dropbox in the early stages was revolutionary. I still remember using Dropbox on dial-up. Right. And it was this incredible thing. Right. It saves my files.
Right.
Backs them up. This is incredible.
And
right?
I don't have to email. I don't have to put it on. At that point, it would have been a CD, probably a DVD. Yeah.
Disc, thumb drive, early thumb drives. Right. And I can share a link and someone else can download it. This is mind boggling. Right. And that company went from nowhere to everywhere so quickly because they built a system for referrals.
Right. Right.
And so my argument is, in essence, this: service-based companies, this is what they need to focus on, is this entire framework. And if they build marketing systems, structures, and processes like they do in operations, but for marketing, right, that covers these pieces, they will experience growth like they have never seen.
Right. Well, and the key is the fact that I could see an ad, a brochure, a website, a whatever, over and over again for a company and a service. But if my friend Betty Lou tells me, oh my gosh, you need to use these people, I'm like, I'm there, Betty Lou, tell me how to do it.
Yep.
It's the whole word of mouth thing. And even if it's a total stranger, maybe it's somebody on Facebook that we're, maybe friends with, we believe them before we believe the ad, the website, the whatever. But as you said, you actually have to have that process, and putting, the line on your email signature, we depend on your referrals. Do they even read that? And let's be honest, it takes it. Where's my thing? Here we go. If your referral program has a little oomph to it, that's even better, and now granted, you still want it to be valid, because you don't want people just referring just to get paid. But yeah, I mean, and that's where you have to have all of the procedures.
We call that a multi-level marketing company.
Yep.
And you know what? Like I know that's a dirty word for a lot of people, but there are a lot of those companies that have made a lot of money.
Oh yeah. Just look at all I guess we don't really have pink Cadillacs around anymore, but Mary Kay is one of the things that, in my generation, that was the thing.
Yep. And so I look at this and I'm like, there are processes and systems and predictability that should exist in the marketing space.
Right.
And it doesn't, I think, largely because of ignorance. But also there's this idea that marketing is artistic.
Right. And we want to control it.
Right. And my argument is marketing is not artistic. Graphics design is artistic. Marketing is the controllable aspect. Right. Believe it or not, I think you can predictably control human behavior. I do. Right. If you put an offer in front of somebody who has a particular problem and you're going to solve that problem, there is a percentage of likelihood that they are going to take that. And if you put that in front of a certain number of people, that over time you can find what that is, right? You can find an average take rate. Say, for every X, I get Y, right? And so it's those kinds of things that I look at and I say, okay, how do we build this into an organization, right? And how do we get marketing agencies to build this into their clients' organizations, right? Because ultimately, I think that what needs to happen is there needs to be a change in the way marketing is purchased and sold in this country. Mostly because if strategy led rather than tactics, and these pieces were in place before we started throwing money down the Mark Zuckerberg retirement fund, right? We often would see far better results for our businesses, right? We would see more growth, right? When we see the statistics of business failure, right? And it's somewhere between 60 and 90%, depending on who you talk to over a 5-year period. I don't believe it's because more than half the people out there are incompetent.
Right.
I don't
or have bad products or
bad products, bad ideas, bad services. I believe if you go and you sell something and what you make off of it is 20%. So you sell a service for $100, you make 120. Right? If I come to you and I say, hey, give me $60, right? I'll give you a few more of those. Right? On paper, that sounds like a great idea.
Right.
The problem is many, many marketers take the $60, return no customers, and now the business doesn't have the ability to provide the service. And this is where there's a massive challenge, because what happens is we put the proverbial cart before the horse. We engage in tactical action before there's a strategic plan. Right? And I think that is a huge, huge issue.
Right.
Huge issue.
And I think we saw that the companies that, many of them that knew their numbers, that knew the strategy, all of those, when the pandemic hit, they were able to pivot. They were able to survive. And some of them really did just say, okay, we're not going to do anything for a month. And because maybe their product or their service was something people had to come in and do things like that. But those that knew their numbers and could figure out, okay, how can we change things they're the ones that survived. I mean, one of the I always got a kick out of the ones, and I'm assuming they're back to normal now, but the distilleries that went from alcohol to disinfecting products, wasn't a huge shift, but they knew by their numbers that they could make that change. And then of course granted it was alcohol and they knew we're going to go back to that, but at the same point, they knew how to make those shifts, and the same with, say restaurants who knew, okay, if we have to cut our staff in half because we have cut our number of customers by 2/3, all of those things can, they knew all of those things. And unfortunately there were obviously businesses that went under and businesses that knew all their numbers and things that went under. But those that survived and continue to survive and thrive have all that information. They're not just flying by the seat of their pants. And if the pandemic taught people anything, it's that, you had to have a lot of that information before you.
Absolutely. And it's funny. Have you ever heard the story of Moxie Cola? Pre Great Depression, the largest soft drink company in the United States was a company called Moxie Cola. You can still purchase it in certain places today. It's around. Tastes terrible. They primarily existed off of billboard advertising. And when the Great Depression hit, they decided that they were going to pull back on their advertising on billboard. And so for pennies on the dollar, this little soda company purchased all of Moxie Cola's billboards. That soda company was a company by the name of Coca-Cola.
Yeah, the little guy down the street here.
Right? And what happened is by the end of the Depression, market share between Moxie and Coke had flipped.
Right.
Oftentimes people use this story to talk about, well, this is why you have to do marketing, and marketing works. I don't think that's our lesson here. I think our lesson here is Coca-Cola saw an opportunity. They knew what the risk was, saw what the opportunity was, and because of those things, they took a very calculated risk. They did not buy all the billboards at once. Right? They slowly rolled this out. Right? And in doing so, they had a proof case that made sense to go bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Right? How do we do that within our businesses today? That's really, I think one of the big pieces here that's absolutely critical is understanding how do we grow intelligently, incrementally, and strategically. In the same way, you wouldn't hire 10 people tomorrow because you expected to be 3 times the size in a month. You would hire them as you needed them.
Right.
How do we do that with our marketing budget? How do we do that with our marketing systems and structures? Those are all the things to look at, in my opinion.
Right. Oh my gosh, Ken, can you believe it? We only have 5 minutes left. I mean, this is, and we've just scratched the surface on this. Because now everybody's going, well, how do we do that? Which just means we have to have you on again. But, I think it is something that, people need to really realize and think about it. Again, the pandemic, everybody scaled back and they thought, okay, we were spending $100. Now we can do 20. What are we going to do with that 20 that makes the difference? And, and then of course the key is, okay, well, if that 20 made a difference, can we do, what happens if we do 40? It's not, let's go back up to 100. It's, let's just kind of keep seeing what, like you said, you buy a little of the billboards here and there, and you really did figure out, okay, maybe this was not working and this is, so, it really is, it's a challenge, especially, for someone who is maybe doing their own marketing, or as you said, trying to figure out, hey, do we hire this done either an agency or, an employee? It's just, some of it is, just knowing the questions to ask.
I think that's the case for doing your strategic planning first.
Right.
Get your strategy in place and then
Mhm.
hire to that strategy.
Right.
So, I need to have an acquisition cost of $52.07 or less. Well, that's what we have to work at.
Right.
And we may not hit that month one, but if we're at $400, the likelihood of us cutting this by 8x, pretty slim.
Right.
This probably isn't going to work for us. Right. There's some very practical ways that you can do this. And that's what we teach our licensees. So what we do is we license intellectual property to marketing agencies to train them. How do you do these things? And once the system is in place, just kind of it moves, and clients see better results, and agencies see more profitability because not only is there more work, but they're getting paid to do the strategic work that really makes a difference and moves them from being a strategic, from being a tactical implementer to being a strategic partner, a trusted resource, if you will.
Right. I love it. Well, tell us more about how someone works with you and how they contact you.
So the best way to get in touch with us is actually go to thepreparedgroup.com/books. This is our agency book club. We send out no less than 3 book summaries per week. And then we have a weekly, so every other week, a book club for marketing agency owners where we sit around and we talk about a book. We talk about problems that they're facing and really figure out how do we grow better as an agency. So that's if you're an agency and you want to reach out to us, that's the best way. If you're not an agency and you'd like us to get in contact with one of our licensees who can go through this process for you, you can go to thepreparedgroup.com, go to the contact page, let us know that you're interested in talking to one of our licensees, and we can connect you with 2 or 3 different groups, and you can see which one of them is the right fit for you.
Cool. Now, if they're small and they can't hire an agency, what resources might you have?
Yeah. So we have, that's the beauty of this is we have guys that are licensees that are one-man shops.
Cool.
We have guys that are 40-man agencies. And so it runs a gamut in finding the right kind of person for them. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of a reality. It's finding something that fits for who they are and really matching them effectively with the right kind of licensees.
Perfect.
Right?
I love it. I love it.
We have licensees that are everything from agencies to business coaches and consultants. And so we've got kind of a great group of people there that we can connect you with.
I love it. And I've opened up your book thing here so that I can remember to look at it later. That's so cool. And for those who are going, oh gosh, this is just, we want to go back to the very start. Educate yourself, folks. This is, it's not rocket science, but it's also, it's worth your time to do this. I remember years ago when I was a student and I was taking a class and I was one of those kids. Tell me why I have to learn this. And it was actually video production. And I said, I'm not going to do video production. Why do I have to learn it? And he said, you might not ever do it, but you might hire somebody to do it. And you need to know the questions to ask and the language to speak. It's exactly what we were talking about. So, educate yourselves, folks. I mean, this is not a hard process. It's just a matter of doing it.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of the time that we live in. You have access if you want it. And you can use that to get the best people possible on your team,
right?
To grow your business, to maximize your revenue, your impact, the difference that you make on the world, the difference that you make on your family, right? Your children, your children's children, etc.
Right. Well, again, Ken, tell us how people connect with you.
Yep. The best way to connect with us is to go to thepreparedgroup.com/books if you're an agency. Or you can go to our contact page there. I'm also on LinkedIn. I go by Kendall Cook, KendellCook, and you can feel free to connect with me there as well.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. Well, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
I went to school to become a pastor, and I worked for a ministry for 12 years. And if I can figure out the marketing thing, those of you who are far smarter than I am, I grew up on a cattle ranch in rural Oregon. Y'all can figure this out, and you can find the right people to fill the holes when you ask yourself, who, not how. Who can I get to do this? Not how do I do this myself? But you're absolutely right. You've got to know the right questions in order to get the right people on your team.
I love it. Well, Ken, we definitely have to have you on again, because this really did just start my little head churning with all sorts of things. And so we will continue this conversation. And I look forward to that. But until then, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having a wonderful discussion. Oh my gosh, time just really flew by with Ken Cook, and everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.